Why was everyone ignoring her at the briefing table? The room was buzzing with chatter, papers sliding, chairs creaking as boots shifted restlessly. Men laughed under their breath, passing glances, trading the same kind of half-smiles soldiers wore when they wanted to appear unbothered. But she felt the weight of their silence pressing against her like an invisible wall. She kept her eyes on the map projected across the far wall. The red lines snaking across the digital terrain weren't abstract to her. They pulsed like veins. Routes she'd memorized, coordinates she'd studied, but to the rest of them it was just another mission, another set of hills, another enemy nest marked in symbols. Her hands rested steady on the table, at least outwardly. Inside there was a tremor, not fear, not exactly, more like a memory pressing against her ribs trying to get out. The commander cleared his throat, shifting the room's noise into order. "We're dealing with an entrenched unit, light vehicles, dug in positions here." His laser pointer circled enemy strongholds. He spoke like it was all routine, another day, another set of targets. No one asked her opinion, no one looked her way, and maybe that was good. She didn't want them to know what was going through her head. Not yet. A whisper of breath caught in her chest. If they knew, they wouldn't let me step foot on that bird. They'd pull me out before sunrise. She adjusted her sleeve, covering the small scar on her forearm. Not that anyone noticed. The commander kept talking, his tone clipped, rehearsed. "We'll insert at dawn. Hit fast, hit clean, get out." His voice didn't waver, but his eyes did when they scanned the room. She caught it, that flicker of doubt. He wasn't sure everyone here was built for this one. And maybe he was right. The soldier 2 seats down, Martinez, was tapping his pen against the table, a rhythm meant to mask nerves. He was young, too young maybe, and his jaw tightened every time the word casualties came up. He wasn't thinking of statistics. He was thinking of someone back home. She understood. She was thinking of someone too. The briefing ended with clipped orders, final checks, an unspoken current of fear wrapped in professionalism. Chairs scraped. Boots shuffled. The men rose, stretching stiff shoulders. Laughter again, forced this time, covering the tension that lived in their lungs. She stayed seated, just for a moment, watching them leave. Watching the distance they kept from her, the way eyes darted but didn't land, a ghost at the table. One voice cut the silence, low, almost careful. "You ready?" She turned. It was Hayes, leaning against the doorway, arms crossed. He had that look he always carried, like he'd seen too many wars stitched into too few years. "I'm ready," she said, and it was true, but not for the reasons he thought. The air outside the tent was colder than she expected. Wind carried the faint metallic tang of machinery, mixed with the acrid bite of diesel. The base wasn't quiet, bases never were, but there was a strange stillness underneath it all, like everyone knew tomorrow had teeth. She walked alone, past the vehicles lined in neat rows, past the shadows of watchtowers where rifles leaned and eyes scanned darkness, past the thin wire fence that separated them from everything beyond. And for just a heartbeat, she wondered what it would feel like not to come back. Not in some dramatic way, just quietly erased, her bunk empty, her locker unopened, her name on a list that would be read with flat voices. Would anyone here even say her name with weight, or would she just become another mark on another report? She stopped under the floodlight near the hangar. The aircraft gleamed silver under its harsh glow. It looked ready. It looked like it had no choice but to be. She placed her palm against the cold metal skin, closing her eyes. It wasn't superstition. It was grounding. Steel was honest. Steel didn't lie the way people did. Somewhere behind her, footsteps crunched gravel. She didn't move. "You don't say much before missions," Hayes said quietly. She opened her eyes. The aircraft's reflection warped her features into something unfamiliar. Words don't change what's coming. He didn't argue. He just stood there, his silence saying more than anything else could. But he didn't know. None of them did. That for her, this wasn't just about completing a mission. This wasn't about medals or reports or orders barked into headsets. This was personal. Because in the hills where they were headed, in the valley marked with red lines and symbols and numbers that meant nothing to most of the room earlier, there was something waiting, something she hadn't told anyone. Not yet. She let her hand slip from the aircraft's surface, the cold fatting too fast. The night wrapped around her shoulders. Tomorrow they'll know. But the thought pressed harder. Will I even survive long enough to tell them? She turned, finally meeting Hayes' eyes. Try to get some sleep, she said softly. He gave a tired half-smile. Yeah, you too. She didn't. Instead, she lay on her bunk, staring at the ceiling, listening to the breathing of the other soldiers around her. Listening to the restless shifts, the muttered dreams, the coughs, the soft thud of someone turning in their sheets. Human sounds, fragile sounds. She envied them, the ones who could close their eyes and drift. She couldn't. Every time her lids shut, her mind replayed it. The voice, the last message, the promise she made, whispering to a photograph that no one else had seen. She reached into her chest pocket, felt the folded paper, worn thin from being opened too many times. She didn't take it out. Not tonight. She just pressed her palm against it, against the words she carried like a hidden wound. Outside, the night deepened. Engines hummed somewhere in the distance. A dog barked, then silence again. She closed her eyes at last, not to sleep but to picture the hills, to picture the path, to walk it in her mind before walking it with her boots. And for a moment, just before dawn, she let herself wonder, what would it cost? Because she already knew the answer. She'd known since the briefing, since the first glance at the map, since long before the commander's voice filled that room. It would cost everything. And still she was ready. What did the dawn sound like when you weren't sure you'd live to see nightfall? For her, it was the slow groan of engines coming to life, the clatter of boots on gravel, the rustle of gear being checked for the third, maybe the fourth time. No one trusted their own hands before missions like this. Everyone knew one mistake could echo too far. The sky was pale gray, the kind of color that sat heavy on the skin. Not quite light, not quite dark, just suspended. She breathed it in like a soldier's prayer. Her vest tightened across her chest as she pulled the straps one last time. The weight of it was familiar now, not comforting, just honest. Armor was a reminder of fragility, of skin underneath. Birds ready, Hayes muttered, passing her with a duffel slung over his shoulder. His voice was sandpapered by fatigue, but his eyes carried that steady burn. He was built for missions, for silence. Others weren't. Martinez was fumbling with his gloves, dropping one into the dirt before snatching it back up, brushing it off like it mattered. His lips moved soundlessly. A prayer, a name, she couldn't tell. She knew that look, though. He'd written a letter, maybe last night, maybe 3. Soldiers always did. They slipped them into helmets, into packs, letters meant to outlive the hands that wrote them. She didn't write one. She carried hers already, folded, worn, a weight against her chest that burned hotter than Kevlar. The ramp of the aircraft hissed open. Metal groaned. The smell of oil and fuel bled into the cool air. One by one, boots climbed inside. The hollow echo of their steps filled the belly of the plane. She was last, always last. She paused at the bottom of the ramp, her hand brushing the steel again. That same silent ritual. Then she stepped into the noise. Inside, the world shrank. Vibrations hummed through the floor, through her boots. The smell of canvas, grease, and sweat layered into the stale air. Seats lined the walls, shoulders pressed against shoulders. No one spoke, not at first. But silence never lasted. First one out buys the first round back, someone muttered, his voice forced. Laughter answered, shallow but welcome, anything to make the ride feel shorter. She sat strapping in, helmet resting against her knee. The thrum of blades above grew louder, louder still. Then the pitch changed, teeth rattling. They were airborne. No one looked at her directly. Not even Hayes. She, grown used to it, being present yet separate, the ghost in uniform. Her eyes closed, not to sleep, to remember. The last time she was on a bird like this, it had been different. The mission had been smaller, a recon run, a nothing. That's what the commander called it. She remembered laughing with the others, sharing a protein bar, tapping boots against the metal floor like restless kids. Until the ambush. Until the smoke. Until the voice on the comms that broke into static, then into nothing at all. Her jaw tightened. She forced her eyes open again. The past pressed against her skull like a blade, but she wouldn't let it in. Not now. She focused on the present, the men around her. Hayes staring straight ahead like stone. Martinez, his lips moving still, whispers pressed into silence. Two others across the way, brothers, not by blood but by years of fighting side by side. They nudged each other's arms, their bond thicker than fear. Human pieces of a fragile machine. The aircraft shook. A dip, a climb, someone cursed under their breath. A hand reached instinctively for the ceiling, bracing. She didn't move. Her body absorbed the shudder like it was expected. 30 out, the crew chief barked over the noise. Helmets clicked, rifles shifted, breathing changed. No one looked anyone else in the eye now. Each man folded into himself. She bent forward, resting her helmet against her chest. Whispered words slipped past her lips, barely audible even to herself. For you, always for you. The aircraft dipped again, a signal. Then the ramp opened. Daylight punched into the hold, flooding gray steel with blinding gold. Wind roared, tearing at their uniforms, howling like some unseen animal. Dust rose, blurring everything into chaos. Boots hit ground. Yells cut through the roar. Formation scrambled, then steadied. She hit last. The earth was solid, rough, unforgiving beneath her boots. The smell of dust and oil and sweat thickened. Around her, rifles swept arcs. Voices cracked over comms. The aircraft lifted behind them, a storm of blades fatting into the distance. And then silence. Not full silence. Birds cried somewhere far off. The low hum of wind rattled through the valley, but compared to the roar of engines, it was suffocating. They moved, one line of shadows threading through broken terrain. The hills loomed, jagged and scarred, their ridges like clenched fists against the sky. Every step pushed memory closer. The smell of the dirt, the shape of the rocks, this was the place she'd never spoken of. Her grip on her rifle tightened. Hayes walked ahead, his shoulders squared, scanning. Martinez trailed near her, too close, his breath uneven. She caught his glance once, wide eyes flashing fear before he dropped them to the ground again. She wanted to tell him it was okay. That fear meant you still valued what you had. But the words froze. They always froze. The radio crackled. A voice cut in, 2 clicks, ridge line ahead, stay sharp. And with that, the air shifted. Heavier. The kind of heaviness that lived in skin, in lungs, in the small hairs at the back of the neck. Everyone felt it. Their pace slowed, boots softer now, breathing measured. A crow screamed from a branch above, startling Martinez. He flinched, cursed under his breath. A hand clamped his shoulder, one of the brothers. A quick nod. A reminder, steady. But her mind wasn't on Martinez. Not on Hayes. Not on any of them. It was on the ridge. On what waited. Her throat burned with words unsaid. She wanted to stop, to tell them, to explain why this place was not just another mark on the map. But if she did, they'd pull her. They'd send her back. And this was the reason she'd signed her name on that dotted line in the first place. So she stayed quiet. The team reached cover, crouching low beneath a line of rocks. The commander's voice hissed through comms. Hold, eyes up, scan. Binoculars lifted, scopes adjusted, fingers hovered near triggers. Nothing. Just hills, just wind, just silence. Too silent. Her pulse thudded in her throat. She pressed herself against the rock, eyes narrowing. The world sharpened, every shadow too still, every silence too long. And then a flash. Metal, sunlight kissing it for half a heartbeat before it vanished. Her breath caught. They were here. Her hands clenched around the rifle, every nerve in her body screaming what her lips refused to say. This wasn't just another mission. This was the one she had been waiting for. The one she had bled for. The one she had carried in silence, folded inside her chest like the letter she never showed. And now it was unfolding. Whether the others knew it or not. Why did the silence feel heavier than the gun in her hands? They crouched in the shadow of stone, eyes fixed on the ridge above. The flash she'd seen still burned against the back of her eyelids. Maybe it had been a trick of light, maybe not. In war, maybe was often the space between breath and bullet. Hayes' voice cracked through the comms, low, steady. "Talk to me. Anyone got eyes?" Scopes swept, binoculars tilted, breathing grew louder in helmets, but no one confirmed. Nothing but rocks and sky stared back. Her pulse climbed anyway. She wanted to say it aloud. They're here, but she didn't, because to everyone else this was just another patrol, another cautious advance. Only she knew what the silence meant in this valley. And only she knew who had been here before. The commander gave the order, "Move slow, stay tight." They pushed forward one by one, shadows flowing across dust, each step a whisper, each heartbeat a drum. Martinez stumbled on loose gravel, catching himself on one knee. His breath hissed sharp. She reached, steadying his elbow before he could fall harder. His eyes met hers for a half-second, wide, young, already cracked by fear. "You okay?" she mouthed. He nodded, too fast, too brittle. She let him go. Hayes glanced back once, his gaze brushing hers. Not quite suspicion, more like instinct, like he could sense the tension locked in her chest, though he didn't know its name. The ridge loomed higher. The air grew thinner. Wind hissed through the jagged stone like whispers in a foreign tongue. Every nerve in her body screamed. And then it came. A single crack, sharp, violent, too close. Stone splintered near her cheek. Dust sprayed. The team dropped flat, rifles up, shouts exploding over comms. "Contact, contact, North Ridge." Gunfire thundered, rolling like a storm from the rocks above. Bullets cut the air, biting into dirt, sparking off stone. The valley turned alive with violence. She pressed against the earth, cheek in the dust, rifle steadied. Her breath slowed. The chaos around her dimmed. Her finger found the trigger. One shape, just one, silhouette against the ridge. She fired, the body dropped. "Hit," someone shouted. But it didn't stop. More flashes, more fire, the rocks bled sparks. The team was pinned. Martinez shouted something she couldn't hear over the gunfire. His hands shook, rounds spraying too wide. Hayes grabbed his shoulder, yanking him down, barking in his ear. "Steady, damn it." One of the brothers moved forward, sliding into cover. His twin stayed back, laying fire, a rhythm born from years of moving together. One covered, the other advanced. But in the stutter of bullets she saw it, the pause, too long. The one up front leaned out. A shot tore through his helmet. He dropped without sound. His brother's scream cracked through the firefight. Not words, just raw sound. He surged forward, reckless, pouring rounds into the ridge as if he could kill grief itself. Hayes shouted, tackling him back before he got shredded. The man fought, choking on rage, his rifle slipping from his grip. His hands were empty, shaking. The valley didn't care. The bullets didn't stop. She steadied her rifle again, eyes narrowing, breath locked. Another silhouette she squeezed, another body fell. Two. Her heart didn't ease, it only burned hotter. Because these weren't just targets, these were them, the ones who had left this place scarred into her. And she had promised. The commander's voice roared in her comms, trying to cut through chaos. "We need to push left, suppress and move. suppress and move. But suppression felt hollow. The ridge was alive, shadows spilling fire. Every second in the open was a gamble. Martinez fumbled his reload, dropping a magazine. His hands shook too hard to catch it. She reached, slamming one of her own into his rifle, her hand over his for a second longer than needed. His eyes flickered gratitude buried under fear. "Stay low," she muttered. His throat bobbed, swallowing hard. He nodded. The brother who had lost his twin now sat hunched against stone, hands in his hair, face pale, chest heaving. Hayes stayed near him, eyes darting between cover fire and the man breaking beside him. For a flicker she saw something human in Hayes' face, not the soldier mask, not the steady burn, something softer, something that carried weight. He knew what it was to lose. The firefight stretched, minutes bled. The valley echoed with gunfire and screams and the metallic cough of rifles. She counted shots, counted breaths, counted bodies falling. And still, her eyes kept pulling back to the ridge. Because she knew who sat higher, she knew whose orders had carved pain into this ground before. The man who had taken what couldn't be returned. And he was still up there. Every bullet felt like a clock tick, every second another chance slipping. Her chest burned, her lips whispered words no one else could hear. "I'll find you, even if it kills me." She didn't realize her finger was shaking on the trigger until she fired again. Another silhouette dropped. 3. The commander barked. Hayes barked. Orders blurred. The team shifted, moving under cover, pulling wounded, dragging themselves through dust and stone. The ridge fear slowed, just slightly, enough for air to return to lungs, enough for the valley's echoes to fade to silence again. But the silence wasn't peace, it was a promise. This wasn't finished. The brother sobbed quietly, head pressed into his knees. Martinez stared at his rifle like it was poison. Hayes knelt nearby, scanning, steady but pale. And she stood, dust streaked across her face, eyes locked on the ridge still looming above. Because she knew what the others didn't. This wasn't the end of contact. This wasn't the last firefight. It was the beginning. And somewhere up there, in the jagged stone where shadows moved like ghosts, was the reason she had come here at all. The reason she had stayed quiet through the briefing. The reason her hand shook when she touched steel. Her promise was waiting. And she would not leave until it was kept. What did silence feel like after the storm? It wasn't peace. Not here. Not now. It was heavier than the gunfire, thicker than the dust still floating in the air. Silence pressed down on them like a hand over the mouth, reminding them that breath itself was fragile. The ridge had gone quiet. No more flashes, no more thunder, just stone, just sky. But she didn't believe in quiet valleys, not in this place. She crouched behind rock, sweat crawling down her spine beneath the vest. Her rifle rested across her knees, the barrel still hot. Her chest rose slow, steady, but her pulse betrayed her. Too fast, too heavy. Martinez sat a few feet away, hunched, helmet tilted forward, shoulders shaking with each breath. His rifle lay slack against his lap, one hand loosely gripping the handle. His other hand pressed against his temple, as if he could hold himself together with sheer pressure. She watched him quietly. He couldn't have been more than 22, barely old enough to buy the drink he'd promised himself when he got home. She wanted to tell him something, anything, that fear was human, that the shaking would pass, that his hands would steady with time. But the words caught in her throat, because she knew better. Sometimes the shaking never stopped. Sometimes it just lived in you forever, long after the noise ended. A soft sound cut through the silence. Not gunfire, not orders, just grief. The brother, the one still alive, rocked slowly against the stone, eyes red, lips moving without sound. His twin's body lay a few yards away, draped with a tarp none of them had wanted to use so soon. His rifle was gone, but his dog tags still glinted, catching stray light like cruel reminders. Hayes knelt beside him, not close enough to smother, not far enough to ignore, just there. His hand hovered once like he might rest it on the man's shoulder, but it never landed. Hayes knew. Some pain didn't want touch. Some pain just wanted space. The commander's voice finally broke through. Low, hard, too steady to be natural. We move in 5. 5 minutes. As if 5 minutes could stitch a man's grief. As if 5 minutes could rebuild trust in trembling hands. No one argued. Orders were gravity here. They didn't need to make sense, they just pulled you forward, whether you were ready or not. She adjusted her pack. The straps dug into her shoulders. The weight felt doubled now. Not from gear, from silence, from ghosts. Her eyes slipped once more to the ridge. The rocks didn't move. The shadows didn't stir, but she could feel it, like eyes pressing against her skin. And deeper still, like a heartbeat she couldn't ignore. Because this wasn't just the ridge. This was the ridge, the place where everything in her had broken once before. She closed her eyes for a breath, just one, and the memory bled through. The last time. The smoke had been thicker, the shouts sharper, her comms alive with static and screams, and in the middle of it a voice. Not hers, not Hayes, someone else, someone she had promised to bring home. But she hadn't. The explosion tore that promise apart before she could take another step. She opened her eyes. The valley returned, dust, sweat, silence. Not yet, she told herself. Not yet, they didn't know, they couldn't. The commander's hand lifted, signaling, boots shifted, packs tightened. The 5 minutes were gone. They moved again. Slower now, heavier. Each step carried more than weight, it carried absence. One man less in their line, one heartbeat missing from their rhythm. Martinez stuck close, too close, his breath uneven, his rifle angled awkwardly. She nudged his barrel down once, wordless correction. He nodded, embarrassed, his jaw tight. She wanted to tell him it was okay, that mistakes happened, that even veterans missed angles under fire. But she didn't, because words like that didn't stick. What stuck was silence. What stuck was what you carried alone. The terrain shifted as they advanced. The ridge dipped into a narrow pass, the walls closing around them like jaws. The sky narrowed. Shadows grew deeper. Her breath slowed again. This was the place where ambush lived. Hayes knew it too. His hand lifted, signaling halt. He scanned, eyes sharp, jaw tight. The team froze, fingers on triggers. Wind hissed through the stone. Loose pebbles skittered down the slope, clattering against rock. Nothing else moved. But she felt it, not in her ears, not in her eyes, in her bones. The commander's voice whispered through comms, "Clear it." Hayes signaled. 2 men moved forward, slow, rifles sweeping. Their steps echoed too loud in the narrow walls. Each crunch of gravel felt like it begged for response. And still silence. Until a cough. Martinez, low, unsteady, muffled into his arm, but too late. A shot cracked from above. Rock exploded inches from his helmet. "Contact," Hayes roared. Gunfire rained again, from both sides this time. The pass lit alive with fire. Bullets sparked against stone, dust choking the air. They dropped, pressing against the ground, pinned in the kill box. Her chest pressed to dirt, lungs burning with dust. She scanned, eyes cutting through haze, searching for shapes. There. High left, a shadow leaning, rifle flashing. She steadied, fired, shadow fell. But 3 more lit up. The team scrambled. Return fire echoed, but the angles were brutal. Every muzzle flash from above had the high ground, the advantage. The brother, the one left alive, rose to fire, rage in every movement. His shots went wide, too wide. His grief shook his aim. A round tore into his shoulder. He collapsed, screaming, clutching red. Hayes crawled to him, dragging him into cover, cursing into comms for a medic. His voice cracked, raw, even as he barked orders. Martinez froze, his rifle limp, his eyes wide, fixed on the wounded man's blood pooling too fast. She grabbed his vest, yanking him down hard, her face inches from his. "Breathe," she shouted, her voice cut sharper than the bullets. "Focus on me." His chest heaved, his lips trembled, but his eyes locked to hers, for the first time since dawn. "Steady. Now fire," she ordered. And he did. His shots weren't perfect, but they were enough to push one shadow back into cover, enough to remind him his rifle wasn't useless. She turned back, eyes narrowing. Another flash, another shape. She fired, missed, adjusted, fired again. The shape fell. 4. Her jaw clenched, her heart hammered. Every shot pulled her closer, closer to the face she'd been waiting to see again. Because she knew he was here. The one who had stolen the voice from her comms, the one who had left her promise shattered. She whispered into the dirt, too low for anyone to hear, "I'm coming." The firefight raged, louder, closer, the pass choking with dust and screams. But all she could feel was that heartbeat, that promise. And she knew she wasn't here for survival. She was here for reckoning. How much could a soldier carry before it broke them? The firefight bled into silence again. The kind that wasn't silence at all, only ringing ears, choked dust, and the uneven groans of the wounded. She pressed her back against stone, chest heaving, rifle slack in her hands. The dirt tasted of iron. Sweat stung her eyes. Around her, the team pulled itself together piece by fragile piece. Hayes crouched over the wounded brother, pressing a bandage against the shoulder wound, his hands slick with blood. "Stay with me," he muttered, over and over, steady like a mantra. "Stay with me." The commander barked low orders into comms, voice gravel thickened by static. He sounded angrier now. Anger was easier than grief. Martinez sat slumped, helmet tipped back, eyes wide and hollow. His rifle still lay in his lap, magazine half spent. His chest rose too fast, but he was breathing, still breathing. She scanned the pass. Dust hung in slanted beams of sun, golden and cruel. The ridge above was quiet again. Shadows melted back into stone, but she didn't believe it, not for a second. Her hand found her chest pocket. The paper inside pressed against her palm like a wound. The brother moaned, dragging her focus back. He wasn't gone yet, not like his twin. His breath was ragged, shallow but present. His hand clutched Hayes' arm, knuckles white. Hayes leaned close, whispering something she couldn't hear. Maybe a lie, maybe the truth softened into something survivable. For a flicker, she envied him. The way he could find words in moments like this. Her throat never let them pass. "Status," the commander snapped. His voice carried authority, but the cracks were there. Everyone heard them. Hayes looked up, face streaked with dust and blood. "He's holding for now, but he won't last long without evac." The commander cursed under his breath. "No bird until we clear this ridge. They'll chew us apart if we call one in now." Silence answered. No one argued, because no one had the strength to argue with truth. The wounded brother's eyes found hers, desperate, searching, like he thought maybe she carried something he needed. She didn't. She turned away first. Her eyes fixed on the ridge instead, the stone, the silence, the ghosts. Because in that silence she could hear it again, the memory. The last time. She'd been pinned just like this, dust in her teeth, blood on her hands, her radio crackling with static. And a voice cutting through it. Not Hayes, not the commander, someone else. Someone she had trusted more than anyone. "I'll hold them, go." But she hadn't gone. She had fought, crawled, screamed. She had begged the comms to clear. And then the explosion swallowed the voice. She clawed through smoke, through dirt, through twisted steel. But there had been nothing left to carry. Nothing but silence. Her hand pressed harder against her pocket now, against the letter folded thin. The last letter, the one she had never sent back. The commander's voice cut her loose from memory. "We move in 10. Hydrate, check ammo, get ready." His tone was iron, but his eyes, when they swept over the team, faltered on her for a second too long. like he was asking something he couldn't put into words. Hayes stood, wiping blood from his hands onto his vest, leaving dark streaks. His face was pale, but his posture unshaken. He caught her eye. For the first time today, he spoke not as a soldier, but as something closer to human. "You good?" It was almost absurd. After everything, after death, after dust and screaming, that was what he asked. She wanted to say yes. She wanted to wear the mask like everyone else. But the truth slipped past her lips, quieter than she expected. No. Hayes didn't flinch, didn't pity, he just nodded once. "Good, means you're still here." Her chest tightened. She looked away before he could see too much. 10 minutes passed like seconds. The team reassembled. Martinez still shook, but his helmet was back on, rifle in his grip. The wounded brother was half-conscious, leaning into Hayes as they shifted him deeper into cover. The commander's jaw was a clenched fist. She rose with them. Dust streaked her uniform. Her throat was dry, but her boots moved when ordered. The pass opened into a narrow plateau. The ridge climbed higher still, jagged teeth cutting the horizon. And with every step closer, her pulse hammered harder. Because she knew who was waiting. She hadn't told them, not Hayes, not the commander, not anyone. But this ridge was where the man lived, the one whose orders had killed the voice in her radio. She had seen his face once in a grainy photograph, a name whispered in debriefings, blurred in reports, not just an enemy, the enemy. And she had sworn to herself, on that day, with the smoke still clawing her lungs, that if she ever stood in this valley again, she wouldn't leave until she found him. Her boots crunched stone, her rifle weighed heavier. The commander whispered through comms, "Stay sharp, eyes up, we're not through yet." She didn't need the warning. Her eyes were already locked on the ridge, her heart already set. The sun slid lower, shadows stretching long, swallowing the valley inch by inch. Every step forward felt like walking deeper into her own memory. And somewhere inside, beneath the dust and silence, a truth burned hotter than fear. This mission wasn't theirs. It was hers. What did survival even mean, if you had nothing left to survive for? The climb was cruel. Loose stone crumbled beneath every step. The ridge never seemed to end, each ledge opening into another, sharper, higher wall. Martinez slipped once, his boot skidding. Hayes grabbed him before he fell. Neither spoke. They didn't have words left to waste. The wounded brother groaned softly, half-carried, half-dragged. His head lolled against Hayes' shoulder, eyes glazed but open. He was breathing, for now. The commander's voice whispered through comms, 200 meters to the outcrop, eyes up, almost there. Almost, the word burned. Almost never meant safe. Almost was a lie soldiers told themselves to keep moving. She stayed near the back, scanning. The valley below was shrinking, shadows swallowing it whole. A hawk circled above, wings stretched silent, patient. And in her chest, the paper burned like fire. The letter. The one she'd carried through 3 deployments, 3 funerals, 3 sleepless years, unopened by the one it was meant for. A sound cracked the air. Not gunfire, not yet, something different. The commander raised his fist. Everyone froze. She listened. Wind scraped rock, boots shifted, and then metal. A faint clink carried on the air like a whisper. She knew that sound, mines. The commander's jaw tightened. He gestured low, motioning the team to spread. "Step where I step, no mistakes." The climb slowed to a crawl, every bootfall deliberate, every breath counted. Martinez trembled so hard his rifle shook. Hayes steadied him again, quiet as stone. And then, as if fate blinked, the ridge leveled. The outcrop spread before them, jagged stone giving way to a flat plateau. The view stretched for miles. The valley lay beneath, small and distant. The sky cracked open with gold as the sun bled toward the horizon. Silence. No fire, no ambush. Just open air and, for a heartbeat, hope. Martinez let out a sound like a laugh choked into a sob. Hayes exhaled hard, shifting the wounded brother into shade. Even the commander's shoulders dropped a fraction. She should have felt it too, relief, a breath stolen back from death. But she didn't, because she knew this wasn't it. Not yet. The commander whispered into comms, "Secure perimeter, we'll call the bird." The words rippled through the team like water to dry earth. A bird meant evac. A bird meant sky, distance, home. Hayes set the brother down gently, hand lingering at his chest. The man still breathed, weak but steady. Martinez crouched, helmet tilted back, staring at the sky like he couldn't believe it still existed. His lips moved. Maybe prayer, maybe apology. And she stood at the edge of the ridge, eyes locked on the horizon. Because she could feel it, the pull, the gravity of what lay deeper in the mountains, the thing she hadn't told them. The commander's voice came again. "Bird inbound in 15. Hold tight." 15 minutes. 15 minutes until someone else made the decision for her. Her hand pressed against her pocket. 15 minutes until the letter never found its ending. She closed her eyes, and the memory struck again. That day, the dust, the chaos, his voice in her ear, the one who had stayed when everyone else had run. Her brother, not by blood, but by everything that mattered more. The only one who had known the truth about her. The only one who had seen her at her weakest and stayed anyway. And the man who had been cut down because someone, somewhere, sold their position. The name that burned in her head every night since. The man she had sworn to find. She opened her eyes. The horizon didn't blur, it sharpened. Hayes' voice pulled her back. "You're too quiet." She turned. He was crouched by the wounded brother, face carved with exhaustion, but his eyes steady, curious. She forced her voice steady. "Quiet keeps you alive." Hayes gave the faintest smile. "Sometimes, but it can also kill you." He didn't push. He didn't ask what she carried. But in that moment, she hated how much he could see without being told. The air thundered. The bird, far off but growing louder. Martinez looked up like a child watching a miracle. The commander's jaw unclenched. Hope it spread fast, fragile, dangerous. The chopper crested the horizon, black silhouette cutting against the setting sun. Its blades tore the silence into pieces. And that was when she knew. It wasn't going to last. The first strike came from the ridge opposite. A plume of dust, a roar, a rocket slamming into stone just meters from the plateau. The team scattered. The bird banked hard, peeling away, smoke trailing from its tail. "Contact," the commander roared. Gunfire erupted. The ridge lit up with muzzle flashes, the enemy pouring fire from hidden nests. The false victory died in a heartbeat. She hit the ground, rifle snapping to her shoulder. Dust filled her lungs, the air hot with lead. Bullets screamed inches overhead. Martinez returned fire, wild, desperate. Hayes pulled the wounded brother tighter into cover, one arm firing blind, the other shielding his friend. The commander shouted into comms, voice lost in static and gunfire. In her eyes locked past the chaos, past the muzzle flashes. Because she saw him. For the first time, not in a grainy photo, not in a whispered report, but in the flesh. Across the ridge, directing fire with a sharp motion of his hand, calm, ruthless. The man who had taken her brother. The reason the letter burned. The reason she was still here. Her chest clenched, her vision narrowed. The commander's voice tore through comms. "We're pinned, we hold or we die. Hold or die." But for her there was no hold, no die. There was only him. She steadied her rifle, hands trembling, heart hammering. The world shrank to a single target. And yet she didn't fire. Not yet. Because the wounded brother groaned again. Because Hayes shouted her name. Because Martinez screamed as a round tore past his arm. Because war never gave you clean choices. Her breath caught, and she realized the cost wasn't in the bullet she hadn't fired yet. It was in every second she waited. What would you give up to finally end the silence that's haunted you? The plateau burned with chaos. Dust clouds curled like smoke, hot brass littered the ground. Every heartbeat thundered with the clash of rifles. The enemy poured fire from the opposite ridge, disciplined and relentless. They weren't amateurs. They were here to finish it. Martinez screamed as another round snapped past his head. He fired back wildly, tears streaking mud down his face. His arm bled where shrapnel had torn him open. He wouldn't last. Hayes gritted his teeth, shielding the wounded brother with his own body as he fired in bursts. Every bullet was a choice. Cover fire, not survival. The commander barked into comms, his voice barely holding. Hold position, birds circling, hold. But she wasn't listening. Her scope had found him. The man who haunted her nights, who'd betrayed her brother's trust, fed their location to the guns that silenced him. He stood tall among his fighters, calm even as bullets cracked around him. He didn't flinch, didn't hide. He commanded. His hand lifted, pointing, and fire followed his gesture like an extension of his will. Her finger brushed the trigger, and in her chest the letter burned hotter than ever. 3 years she'd carried it. 3 years since she'd heard that last voice break through comms. I'll hold them, go. Her brother had trusted her to live, not to avenge, not to burn herself hollow chasing ghosts. But the rage it begged, if she took the shot it would end. His voice might finally quiet. Hayes shouted, she flinched. The wounded brother's blood was seeping faster now, staining Hayes' vest dark. His lips moved, no sound coming. Eyes rolled back. Martinez cried out again, rifle slipping from his grasp. He clutched his wounded arm, his other hand shaking too much to reload. The commander pressed against stone, comms screaming static. He slammed his fist against his helmet, desperate, broken in ways his men couldn't see. And in that moment, her finger froze. Because vengeance was clean, but war never was. Her breath hitched. If she took the shot, maybe she'd kill the man across the ridge. Maybe she'd bury the ghost. But she'd lose them. The living Hayes Martinez, the brother still clinging to life. Her eyes blurred, for the first time not from dust or sweat, from tears. The commander's voice cracked. We're losing them, we can't. She screamed inside her head. Not like last time, not again. She tore her eye from the scope, forcing her breath steady. Hayes smoked now. Hayes didn't hesitate. He ripped a canister from his vest, yanked the pin, hurled it across the plateau. Thick white plumes erupted, choking the ridge in haze. The enemy fire faltered, their aim shattered. Move, she shouted, louder than she'd ever let herself be. The commander's head snapped toward her. For a beat, his shock showed. Then he nodded, snapping orders to the others. Martinez stumbled up, leaning on his uninjured arm. Hayes hauled the wounded brother tighter, teeth gritted, shoulders bowed. The bird's roar returned, blades chopping closer through smoke. The ridge shook with fury. Enemy rounds sprayed blind through haze. Shouts in a foreign tongue echoed across stone. She didn't run, not yet. Her eyes found him again through a break in the smoke, the enemy leader, calm, still standing. His gaze locked with hers across the distance. For a heartbeat, everything else fell away. He raised his hand again, pointing directly toward her. The rage flared. The letter in her pocket screamed to be answered. Her rifle rose. Finger on trigger. Breath caught. The world narrowed to one man. But then Hayes shouted her name again, desperate, raw, not as a soldier, as a friend who didn't want her lost. She broke. Her rifle lowered, she turned. Boots pounded stone as she sprinted into smoke. into the arms of the team clawing their way to the bird's rope ladder. Bullets chased them. Martinez slipped. Hayes hauled the brother up. The commander shoved from behind. And she was last, always last. The bird's engine screamed, heat and dust whipping the plateau. Hands grabbed her arms, pulling her inside. The cabin filled with the groans of the wounded, the curses of the commander, the shaking breath of Hayes. She collapsed against the wall, chest heaving, rifle limp in her hands. The bird lifted, shuddering, climbing fast. The plateau shrank, the ridge blurred in smoke. Through the haze, just before it swallowed him, she saw him one last time. The man, the enemy, still standing, still alive. Her finger twitched, but the letter in her pocket pressed back harder. And for the first time in years, she let it. The bird banked toward the horizon, leaving the ridge to the silence it deserved. She closed her eyes. The ghost's voice whispered again, softer now. "I'll hold them, go." And for the first time she went. What sound remains when the guns finally go quiet? The bird carried them away, its engines thundering, its frame rattling with every gust of mountain wind. But inside the cabin, the noise was different. It was the gasps of the wounded brother, each breath shallow, clawing, stubborn. It was Hayes whispering steady words, his hand never leaving his friend's chest. It was Martinez shaking, teeth clenched, lips trembling prayers he couldn't finish. And it was silence, her silence. She sat against the cold wall, rifle laid across her knees, hands trembling long after the trigger had slipped from them. The commander crouched near the cockpit, helmet still on, visor hiding his eyes. His shoulders hunched in a way that betrayed him more than any words could. No one spoke to her. No one asked why she hadn't taken the shot. Maybe they didn't know. Maybe they didn't care. Maybe they'd seen enough death to understand without needing to ask. The valley shrank beneath them. The ridge faded into smoke and shadow. The sun finally dipped, bleeding its last light across the horizon. She pressed her hand against her chest pocket. The letter still waited there. Unopened, unsent, unforgiven. Hayes' voice cut through the drone of blades. "He's fatting." The wounded brother's breath slowed, his eyes half-lidded. Hayes gripped his hand, knuckles white, as if sheer force could tether him to life. Martinez leaned closer, whispering broken words in Spanish, words heavy with desperation and faith. The commander gave no order. No command could hold back what was coming. The brother exhaled once, twice, then no more. His hand slipped from Hayes' grip. The bird's engines roared louder, but inside, the silence consumed everything. Hayes bowed his head, blood streaked across his face. Martinez pressed his palms together, tears carving lines through the dust on his cheeks. The commander finally removed his helmet. His hair was damp with sweat, his eyes dark, hollow. For the first time, he looked less like a leader and more like a man who carried too many ghosts. And she pressed the letter tighter against her chest. This one wasn't for the fallen. It never had been. It was for the living, for the one who had trusted her to walk away, not stay behind. She opened her eyes to Hayes staring at her, not with anger, not even with blame, but with a question he didn't have the strength to voice. She shook her head once. That was all she gave him. The bird touched down at the outpost an hour later. Dust and sirens greeted them. Medics rushed in, pulling the wounded, lifting Martinez, checking pulses, shouting orders. Hayes stumbled out, blood on his vest, his eyes distant. The commander followed, silent, unreadable. She lingered in the cabin, the last to leave. The engines wound down, the blades slowed. The night closed in. When she finally stepped onto solid ground, the weight of the mountains lifted, but only enough to remind her it was still there. She walked past the noise, past the stretchers, past the shouting medics and the blinking lights, past Hayes, who looked like he wanted to stop her but didn't. She found the quiet edge of the outpost, where floodlights didn't reach, where the desert wind whispered instead of screamed. and only then did she take out the letter. Her hands shook as she unfolded it. The paper was creased, stained, worn thin by years of sweat and war. The handwriting blurred in places, smudged by time. She read the words again, though she knew them by heart. Her brother's words. "If you're reading this, it means I didn't come back. Don't carry me like a stone. Carry me like a compass. Find the horizon, not the ghosts." She closed her eyes. The night air stung. She had carried him like a stone, for years, heavy, crushing, unforgiving. And tonight she had almost buried herself under it. But she hadn't. For the first time, she hadn't. Hayes' footsteps approached behind her. She didn't turn. He stood beside her in silence. The desert wind tugged at their uniforms, carrying dust into the night. After a long pause, he said quietly, "You saw him, didn't you?" She didn't answer. "You could have taken the shot." His tone wasn't accusation, it was truth. Her throat worked before words came. "And then what?" Hayes looked at her. She didn't meet his eyes. "He's still out there," Hayes said. "So are we," she whispered. Silence stretched again, but it wasn't empty, not anymore. Hayes nodded once, not in agreement, not in understanding, but in recognition. He left her there with the wind, the stars, the ghosts. She held the letter one last time, then folded it carefully, pressed it back against her chest, not as a wound, not as a weight, but as a compass. The horizon stretched dark and endless before her. She didn't know what came next, didn't know if vengeance would still call her, if silence would still chase her. But she knew this. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. And tonight, action meant walking away. She turned from the ridge, from the smoke, from the past. Her boots struck stone, one step, then another. And the silence followed, but lighter now. Almost bearable. Almost